See, let me add a little bit to that story. I lived in a dormitory at Bethel College called Sunset Hall, and there were some other guys there. They were juniors and seniors, and they were always giving the younger guys, advice about the girls on campus.
Uh-huh.
And there was a fellow there from Lehigh, Kansas, by the name of Leo Jantz.
You better not list any names.
And he said, Jim, I think Suds, that's the way she was known. I think he said, you ought to take Suds pretty seriously because I think her dad has money. And
Wow.
that heightened my interest, and I pursued that matter, and we were getting pretty serious. And then I discovered there wasn't much truth in that matter.
You found out after we were married.
I always called her Suds if we were on a really good relationship. If relations were a bit strained, she became Shirley. And I remember taking her home to Pretty Prairie to meet my family for the first time. And when I introduced her to my mother, I said, now this is Shirley Suderman, but she has a nickname and we can just call her Suds like I always do. We had a really nice weekend there on Sunday afternoon as we were getting ready to come back to the campus, which was about 60 miles away. Mother and Dad were sort of seeing us all at the door. And my mother said, Bubbles, it's been a great pleasure getting to know you.
So how did you propose?
Really carefully.
Anything romantic?
Well, I had a 1942 green Plymouth. We were at Kansas State. We were in our senior year. Mm-hmm. And Kansas State, Manhattan, Kansas, is a fairly level town, flat. But there is one hill there called Bluemont Hill. And there was a winding road that went up to the top, and a lot of couples would go up there with their cars and, do what couples do.
You want to elaborate?
And so I went up there. We went up there together, and I asked her if she would marry me, and she didn't blink an eye. She said yes right away. Mm-hmm. Right? Okay. So we were engaged on Bluemont Hill in Manhattan, Kansas. Mm-hmm. But my folks really liked Shirley because they saw her as being a very thrifty girl. She didn't wear a lot of fancy clothes, and she was always so sensible. So she caught the eye and the favor of my mother very quickly.
Grandma, what did your parents think of Grandpa?
They really liked him very, very much too. I think they came up to see us. We called them soon afterwards, and they came up to see us, and they liked him also.
The eldest, of course, was this lady who's become really a delightful person now that she's older.
She was a sweet baby too.
And her name is Terry, and she was born when I was a graduate school at Michigan State University. And she was born at Sparrow Hospital in Lansing, Michigan. And I remember I was bringing her and her mother home from the hospital. And her mother said, well, Jim, from now on it's going to be a little different around meal times. The baby comes first and you'll get your food later. And I kind of lost my cool at that. But I recovered and we got along okay.
Now, I remember, even in the hospital, she was just born, and it was time, I was nursing her, and when it would be time to eat, she'd go, like this. Kind of like Woody Woodpecker. It was really cute.
Yeah. Terry was not the easiest child to raise. She was a little headstrong, but I think it was a reflection of her innate intelligence that was being manifested at that point. But one thing I remember about Terry, I don't know how she did this, but when she had a bath, the entire bathroom was wet. The floor, the countertop, the sink,
When she was much older.
but even much older until the teenage years. She must have gotten in there and just splashed around in that tub or shower. Right, Mom?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim was number 2 child. Tim was born in Cali, Colombia. Well, Tim Tim was mischievous, but he was also, I think the word would be wily, clever, you know. And we had, I think at that point when he was in high school and just learning to drive, we had only one car. And like a good father, we let Tim use it from time to time. But I would always check the mileage before he drove off because I wanted some record of how far he'd driven this car. And he had the impression that if he backed the car home, the mileage would not accumulate. So he would sometimes sort of back in the driveway late at night thinking he could cut the mileage down that way. And he'd switch the car off so there would be no noise when he came in.
Was he successful?
No, we knew all the time what he was up to. Knew
Did
when
they
he
really,
came in.
Tim?
Yeah, pretty much.
He was a very good musician. He played
Classical banjo, classical guitar.
And,
Did you play the French horn, Tim?
or the trumpet. Did you play the trumpet?
Trumpet. Played the trumpet.
Yeah,
Or you played the
like a
trumpet too?
virtuoso.
Like a virtuoso. Virtuoso.
Okay. Truth.
But he was really talented at playing. And you read.
Okay.
Oh, Todd was born between Tim and Tom. And he was born 5 weeks early, and he lived only 30 hours. And probably if he had been born today, they would have treatment, but they didn't have treatment at that time. He didn't have the surfactant in his lungs, which we found out later. That particular week, if he'd have been born 2 months early, he could have survived much easier than that week when the lungs were going through a special development stage.
Okay. I'm gonna. What are your first memories of Tom?
Well, let's see.
Where was he born, dear?
He was born in Walnut Creek, California. He was born very quickly. In about 20 minutes, Tom had arrived. And he was a good baby. We moved to Guatemala when he was 3 months old. And at first he slept in the suitcase until Terry closed the lid of the suitcase one day. And then we were able to get a bed for him eventually. And our helper carried him around in a wapil in the back on his back, you know. Blanket. And he wasn't a very good eater at all. And she would say, pobrecito, pobrecito.
His helper was an Indian lady, and she must have been all of 5 feet tall. Mm-hmm. And she said in Spanish, Tom was always sick with an upset stomach and diarrhea. And she said, I'm sorry, but I don't think Tom's going to make it. And now if she could see Tom, Tom would be fully twice her height. So